All right, whether you like it or not, he's back. But the truth is, at least what I saw was a lot of people were like, there were people that were like, make him permanent. Him and Junt, crowd up the podcast. 5 people. But no, you were very well received, as I recall.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty awesome. I think we were sharing a lot of the same people, for a lot of it. And then I definitely got some new subscribers from your channel, which was cool. And I thought that was funny because it was titled like Dancing with Ghosts joins Red Cow, and someone was like, "Is he joining forever for good?"
Oh, right, yeah. You gotta watch those accidental communication. But yeah, I thought well, there was maybe like 1 or 2. You're kind of like me in that. If they don't like you, they really don't like you. So they're generally well received. And then there'll be this one guy who's just like, I don't like his fucking hair. I don't like his fucking tattoos.
How come it's green now?
Shortly after, or I don't know, a week or 2 after you were on, you were kind enough to go watch my latter 2 movies, which was the proper choice, by the way. I mean, I've made 4 narrative features. And the first 2, I don't know, the first one is a trauma film made by high schoolers. And I worked for 6 years on it very hard. It was my whole life for a period of time. I could talk all day about what it taught me about filmmaking and everything else, but it's not what I would lead with. It's not like I would say check this out. This really sums up who I am creatively. But it's also been a long time since I've made a narrative feature. I mean, Having Fun Up There was made in it released in 2014. So we're going on 10 years.
Oh, wow.
10 years.
Jeez. Well, I mean, I know you were bigger in those movies, so I knew they had to be, kind of old, but I didn't realize that they were that old. The thing with the decades now, they don't really have a distinct. I mean, they do have a distinctive feel in the technology and stuff, but a movie from 2014 isn't going to be oh man, that was
right.
Such a different time. From say 2004 to 1994, there was there was a much bigger difference. But now that we're in the 2000s, it's just it's all blurred together. Is the 20s gonna have a feel to it? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's true. I feel 2010 was when people everybody could get a hold of a DSLR, and if you have a DSLR and you're shooting your film on that, then chances are you're filming on lenses that look a little bit more like a movie, and certainly by that point, 1080p had been standardized. And so, I remember EJ and I met around that time, 2010, in the Masters of Fine Arts, in our film classes. And I remember he and I both, and we didn't even know each other all that well, but we already were lamenting about well, fuck, everything has that shallow depth of field shit, and everybody is going out and filming tech demos with their DSLRs and uploading them. We used to make fun of Vimeo a lot, or Vimeo is just this dumping ground of DSLR content. And then, of course, much later in life, we would make no views years later.
I mean, it's not a lie that's what Vimeo is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to be arty Twitter, but it still is. I think it still is a dumping ground for people's film projects.
But then I think because YouTube basically has no narrative content on it, you don't go to YouTube to watch fiction. 10 years ago, everybody wanted to be a filmmaker. And if you talk to those same young people, they'll tell they're like, yeah, they actually tell me, they're like, you're kind of boomerish. You're kind of you're like James Rolfe. You think of everything as a film.
Well, we've made over 200 Box Mac films.
The only way that you can really gain the confidence to tackle something when you're a young person in New Jersey or Massachusetts and you watch independent films and want to make one of your own, you sort of have to delude yourself. It's that you have to kind of act as though the thing you want to be, you already are. Yeah. And so you have to go through an embarrassing period where you're claiming to be something you're not.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with music, with being in a band. You have to, and some people are really good at this, better than me. You have to have the image right out the gate. You have to have the look. You have to have the songs. You have to have the bio.
Since there is no audience for somebody just starting out or somebody who's just making something for the first time, you do have to sort of project that, you have to, you have to be your own carnival barker. And I remember something that used to really go up my ass when I was around other young filmmakers was when they would concern, even though I was guilty of it with the special features or whatever, is they would really, they would spend a lot of time and thought on what it looked like to be making the movie. So in other words, if there was a student film being shot for $1,000, across 2 days, they would really concern themselves with craft services. They would really concern themselves with titles and clipboards, concern themselves with, like, I have an AD. And the AD needs to talk to the PA, and the whole thing is just like the most informal shit. Like, because one of the things I always loved about film
the double DP.
Yeah, the double DP, yes.
I'm the writer, director, producer, and head PA.
And I'm the AD, second AD, co-producer, DP, and double DP.
The thing I always loved about film as an art is that nothing outside of the frame matters. And so you actually can kind of be a mess outside of the frame,
I feel like Doug Walker went through a lot of that, and that's what the whole change the channel document that became popular back in a couple of years ago. Yeah. And like all the YouTubers were like, and I've kind of like had a controversial take on this myself, because like I'm sitting here like, dude, you've seen the guy's videos. Were you really expecting to show up on the set and have a fucking craft service table? No, that's not going to be there. Like, there was like 25% of it that dealt with like the sexual whatever scandals. Like that was a different topic. I didn't.
It's so funny you bring this up, because our friend Jason, who's been on the show, he talked to us about Sega Genesis. He has his own awesome channel, Jason Graves. He loves bottom of the barrel, low view, people making movies. It's his favorite thing. He linked me to the making of Kick-Assia, Suburban Nights, and To Boldly Flee, the Channel Awesome movies. I've never seen the movies themselves. It seems insurmountable to me. We're talking about multi-hour green screen shit where people are dressed up like John Travolta, and I don't know that I can do it. But I think I've decided I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna watch them all. I know that Quentin Reviews has been there. So there's making ofs. There's like a 40-minute blog about Kick-Assia. There's kind of like a half behind the scenes, half blog of Suburban Nights. And then there's like a full-blown making of To Boldly Flee. They're most notorious of the three, as far as I can tell. And,
you knew there was going to be making ofs of all those. There was probably like a making of the making of, like, given how Doug Walker is. Like, he is his own biggest fan. Like,
just like everyone pointing cameras at each other like a Mexican standoff.
No, yeah, that really does happen in that straight up happens in the video. They're like, how many cameras can we do?
We've reached the vlog singularity.
Last time I saw 4 cameras, a snuff film broke out.
I was a pig in shit watching these making ofs. I watched them like basically in one morning. I just was loving them. Because I'll always love DIY filmmaking stuff, whether it's bad or good or well made or poorly made. I just enjoy watching people try to shoot something in a finite period of time. Remember Project Greenlight on HBO? Do you remember that show?
Vaguely.
It's, if you're into this sort of thing, you gotta see it. The only downside is they play up the drama a lot. Like, it's like early 2000s reality TV, right. In its style, but there's so much to be said about Project Greenlight. Like, in the first season, they got a guy to write and direct. They got like this Mormon guy that was super unfunny, and he just fumbles his way through a movie. It's compelling TV.
Project Greenlight launched a competition for amateur filmmakers. After a lengthy selection process, Pete Jones, a struggling writer from Chicago, was chosen as the winner.
This is like all prior to 2013, right? So like, it's kind of like the trauma making ofs where compassion is not valued. Like, the more of an asshole you are, the more that kind of telegraphs your professionalism. So everybody's just a big old prick to one another.
I'm throwing bullshit on that. Stealing shit and not telling anybody's bullshit. There's producers here, we're on set, we're in a big rush, we're trying to get some free shit, and just rolling film while we're all standing around is bullshit. I walked right out there and just yelled at him, right in front of everybody. And that, was a conscious choice on my part. If they keep fucking around, things will happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like we have a making of, or behind the scenes rather, of like all of our music videos up to a certain point. When we're filming, it's just me and her. Usually, we never have any help. So I get an idea, and I try to keep it as low budget as possible. Like, is there a public area that I can just run and gun with the camera, use it real quick, and then bounce, before people tell us to leave, kind of shit. So in those kind of situations, like, not your temper, but your frustration meter is like, it's a lot. The tolerance for it is a lot lower. It's a lot easier to like if Ari like flubs a line or something, I'm like, are you fucking serious? Like, now we gotta do this shit again. Come on, man. Come on, we gotta get, so.
I think part of it is just you care a lot more about the project when you're younger, and so you're just like, this is, we have to get all of our shots in today. We don't have a lot of other opportunities. And yeah, I remember like my stress level would get keyed way up. But
now Frankie doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, well, honestly, I mean, like, that was one of the things that struck me about watching these behind the scenes was I was like, I haven't cared this much about one of my productions in a long time. It helps to be around people who are, like have good temperaments like EJ. Like if EJ's shooting, I'm pretty much not stressed out. He knows what we're doing. He knows when to hurry up, when to slow down. Like communication is very, very quick between the two of us. Like we almost are nonverbal.
It's pretty crazy. And like maybe like Frankie will nudge me and I'll be like, okay, I know what I gotta go over here.
Where like the guy who shot, he was one of two cinematographers on Sexually Frank, and he also shot Having Fun Up There. He was a good friend for a while, but he was also like a high tension kind of guy, and I found that often, to communicate what I wanted, I had to be very explicit. I had to take a lot of like mental energy. That can eat into your day, and it can eat into your mood,
Yeah, just communication in general sometimes is hard because like I won't know the exact like phrase for what I want the person to do. It's usually Ari, so I'll just like grab her and put her somewhere and be like, and then walk that way slowly, and and eventually I'll mold it into like what it's supposed to look like, because like I'm not a director or whatever. This is all, anything I've ever shot is very much like just learning as I go and fixing a lot of shit in post, like with on Final Cut or whatever. So yeah, I don't know.
How long have you been making videos for your music?
The first music video I made in 2017. It was for a song called "A Glorious Night," and I'm painted up like a fucking Papa Shango from WWE. I didn't mean to copy his style, but apparently I did later on. The song still slaps, though. We play it live still, but yeah, that was the first one I ever like did, and like I had this one scene where like Ari opens the cabinet, and I put the camera inside the cabinet so you get the view of, the cabinet opens to reveal her. And I thought that was like fucking brilliant. I'm like, man, I have a knack for this. Like who else would have thought to do that for their first like music video? And then I go back and look at it, and I cringe out at like 90% of it. Like the parts where I'm playing guitar as me without face paint on is the only like non-cringy parts, because like, oh, I'm actually playing like guitar there, and I don't suck at that. But everything else was just like really pretty bad. But like you said, you have to like kind of
fake it
and suck the first couple times, and then it starts getting less and less sucky, and then you get to movies such as Sexually Frank, and it was very nice of me to do this, because how many times, even either in real life or podcast or whatever, you're like, oh yeah, I've done this thing, you should check it out, I think you'd like it, and the other person goes, oh okay, and then in their mind they're like, there's no chance in hell that I'm ever gonna watch any of that shit.
Well, it's just so hard to ask people to try something that there's no like entryway for, like all the stuff that gets clicks on YouTube, for instance, is normally like, oh, I like this person doing this, so I'll watch them doing that. There's normally some connective tissue. Like, I like video games, so I'll watch this guy review video games. I like the guy who reviews video games, so I'll watch the guy who reviews the guy reviewing video games. Yeah, but like an original narrative fiction. I think of RedLetterMedia, for instance. These guys spend a lot of time reviewing movies, and they make their own, and then you go to watch them, and they're not good, like they know how to drive, but they don't know the destination, or some analogy.
Yeah. They come off as like anti-movies in a way. They're just
that's the risk, whenever you're a big, critiquer. There's this guy locally. He's this old curmudgeon musician who never made it, but he's super talented. He's an amazing drummer. He can play all the instruments. He's got his own recording studio. He's revered by the dinosaur musicians of Jacksonville, but this guy just shits on anything positive, and he loves to just be this negative old cunt. And finally, like a couple years ago, he released his own album, right? And it was a double album, not even just a single. Let's give him just 12 songs, you know. No, you get 24 fucking songs. And I listened to like, okay, dude, who knows everything, who is an authority on the arbiter of what's good art and what's bad. Let's hear your shit. And it was okay. It was kind of boring. It didn't sound like it gave him the authority to rain down all his criticism that he had over the years. And that seems to always be the case with those guys who are so good at critiquing, and they say they're also into, you know, movie making or whatever. But then when they do their version of it, it's like, wow, that's even worse than the.
I remember that in grad school, just like all the professors. Like I learned a lot from so many of them, and I learned like, you know, because I basically went to grad school for film knowing basically nothing. I barely knew what an aperture was. So I was learning all this stuff, and there would always be this day in class where like people were like, "Oh, can you like we'd say to the professor, can you show us your work?" And they show us their work, and it's like dog shit.
Oh, that's like a thing.
And like it brought me to some sort of reality of like, okay, all right.
Yeah, like, you know, and to be fair, like it's not necessarily the same skill. Being able to analyze something and being able to create something. It's why that monologue in Ratatouille exists, where he's like, "A great critic is not as good as the best chef in all of Paris."
In many ways, the work of a critic is easy. We risk very little, yet enjoy a position over those who offer up their work and themselves to our judgment.
Knowing Frankie's editing style, this is where he will insert that video clip when it hits YouTube.
You're like my daughter. We've been going out and shooting, you know, Junt's carts and stuff, and she heard me talking about like 10 years ago we went to the same place. She goes, "Dad, cut in 10 years ago."
You know, I woke up today feeling like your daughter, actually.
Cut back to 10 years from this video.
I will. Do you hear what she's telling me? She's giving me editing notes.
Subscribe to Red Cow Entertainment on Patreon for full episodes every other week.